Good evening, all you good workers, and welcome to the special People's World May Day Town Hall. I'm Cameron Harrison, and I'm a labor correspondent for People's World based in Detroit, Michigan, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's discussion. May Day 2026 is shaping up to be like no other we've seen before. Trade unions, central labor councils, state labor federations, and workers all across the country are taking back the original workers' holiday and making it their own. And tonight, we've got quite the lineup uh, to discuss the huge development that's taking place around the country, as well as other issues facing our labor movement. And we've got labor leaders, organizers, movement veterans, five people who bring a wealth of experience to the table. And I'll introduce them all to you in just a moment. But first, a word about a sponsor tonight. People's World has been a leading voice for workers in the labor movement for over 100 years, publishing news and analysis every day that informs workers' struggles and mobilizes people to come together to take action. This publication is in the midst of its annual fund drive, working overtime to try to raise $140,000 by May Day. So if you like events like these and appreciate them, please think about making a donation or becoming a monthly sustainer. You can go to peoplesworld.org/donate. In People's World, we have no corporate sponsors. We just run on the support of our readers. So whatever you can afford to give, every dollar goes towards keeping our reporters on picket lines and in the streets with the people. Your support and solidarity are so, so appreciated. Now let's get to our panelists this evening. First, we'll hear from Sister Faye Guenther, a firebrand in the UFCW, the United Food and Commercial Workers, and president of the huge Local 3000 in Washington State. Next, we'll hear from Brother Fred Redmond, who needs no introduction, the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO and veteran of the mighty Steelworkers Union. Then we'll hear from Brother Ed Ott, a longtime trade unionist with the CWA and former executive director of the New York City Central Labor Council. After Brother Ed, we'll hear from Sister Sylvia Chapman, a Chicago native and CWA District 4 staff representative. And finally, but certainly not least, we'll hear from Sister Caitlyn Clark, who's the Executive Director of Essential Workers for Democracy and comes recently off the picket lines out in Greeley, Colorado, supporting the United Food and Commercial Workers Local 7 meatpackers on strike. The way tonight will run is that we will hear from each of our guests on what is happening in the labor movement surrounding them and what May Day means this year, especially in the context of the billionaire-backed MAGA assault on all working people. Afterwards, we'll do a brief Q&A period. We ask that you please put your questions in the chat and we will get to as many of them as we can. And thank you so much. Sister Faye, take it away.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And hi, everybody. I can't see you, but I'm really excited to be here. My name is Faye Guenther. I'm the president of UFCW 3000. We're up in Washington, a little bit of Idaho, a little bit of Oregon. I grew up in rural Oregon, 12 miles outside of a town of 150 people. I watched my town get destroyed by corporate greed. The logging companies came in, took all the logs and destroyed people's bodies, destroyed our community, and somehow blamed it on the spotted owl. For work and for school, I moved to the city, and I realized that all the problems that we had in rural America were the same problems we had in urban America. Everything was too expensive: childcare, housing, food, all of those sorts of things. And concentrated wealth was causing problems for all of us. I started organizing, and what I want to talk to you today is the organizing we need to do for May Day this year, next year, the year after, every year until we can take back our country and take back worker power and take back what we need so we can survive and we can thrive. So I was asked to talk a little bit about what UFCW 3000 is doing in the state of Washington. And one of the things, I'm watching the Washington state labor movement come together like never before. I think even in stronger ways than during the WTO protests where we came together. I remember the Teamsters and Turtles were united. So this is really exciting. And one of the tools that we're using is work site by work site, conversation by conversation. We are moving a general strike pledge to protect workplaces and communities. And this general strike pledge also includes a commitment to come to the May Day, May 1st rally. And it talks about armed, masked agents in our places of business, provoking protests and clashes with the public, putting workers in the middle of these tense situations. It talks about what we see with ICE agents coming in, and it asks workers to think about what they would do, what red lines would be crossed, and commit to coming to May Day, and also say that they would take an active role in preventing federal government overreach that interferes with their ability to do their job. That could include joining with other workers in a general strike. So we're having these conversations worksite by worksite to really make sure that we're talking deeply about what we're seeing out in the world that is negatively impacting workers. And so that's a tool that I can share with other people. A lot of times I'm in rooms where we're all sort of talking to each other. We have to take these conversations right to workers and talk about committing to coming to May Day, committing to a general strike. And so I just wanted to share that tool. We also have we're using talking points. We're talking about general strikes that have happened in the past and how they've helped build power. And we've really been talking about, when the normal democratic process fails, refusing to go to work is one strategy people can use to push back on the government and push back on corporations. And withholding labor and economic disruption is the only way to make sure people understand we are not going to accept business as usual. And that's sort of to the theme of no school, no work, no war, no ICE, all of the things that we're out there protesting for May Day. And I hope all of you, I'm sure all of you are already committed to going to a May Day event. And I believe fundamentally, when we go take action together, we remind ourselves about collective power. We remind ourselves about what organizing feels like and looks like, and we reclaim our power. That's what I'm hoping we all do so that we can move towards that future that we all want. And I think, honestly, I know things can be really bad and things seem really horrible, but I feel like we may be closer to the future that we need to have where we can thrive towards a multiracial democracy. It's within our grasp if we can unite and really turn out for May Day, turn out for other events coming up, and make sure we protect each other and our elections in November. With that, I'll hand it back so the next speaker can speak.
Thank you so much, sister. Next, we'll hear a national perspective, and we're so grateful to hear from Brother Fred Redmond, Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO and longtime member of the United Steelworkers Union. Brother Fred, take it away.
Well, excuse me. Well, thank you, Cameron. And I want to really thank the incredible staff at People's World. You are spreading the gospel of this movement far and wide, and we appreciate People's World and everything that they do to make sure that our message of self-determination, of dignity and respect for all workers is being heard loud and clear. And look, I can't tell you how important it is to have an outlet by workers and for workers, telling important stories about working people and families in a way you just do not see anywhere else. So thank you for all that you do. Let me begin by saying May Day simply means this. May Day is our day. It belongs to all working people. And if you go back to my hometown of Chicago and go back to 1886, you saw one of the boldest things that workers in this country have ever done, refusing to show up for work. Tens and thousands, mostly immigrants, were in the street protesting and bringing the economy to a halt. And out of that struggle came the tragedy at Haymarket Square. When people heard what had happened, it was a chilling effect on union organizing, on the attitudes that people had toward immigrants and the working class. But the other thing it did was galvanize the labor movement, not just at home, but abroad as well. It paved the way for massive wins, for workers to stand up and not live in fear, and really realize the power that they had together. And here we are, more than 100 years later, in so many ways, we're in the exact same fight. We are seeing our dignity and our rights trampled on by this current administration. They're turning our government into an ideological weapon against us by occupying cities, criminalizing the poor, scapegoating black and brown people, attacking and retaliating against anyone who opposes their agenda or anyone who does not look, live, or love like them. They're consolidating their power and wealth, stripping our rights to collective bargaining and forming a union, our right to due process, our right to free speech, our right to choose our elected leaders. And do I need to go on? Look, the bottom line is this administration has betrayed working people and sold us out to the billionaire class. But we still have that same weapon that we've had all of these years, the most powerful weapon that working people have, which is our solidarity. And working people are looking for a movement right now, one that can take on the billionaires and the corporate interests that have led to extreme inequality, a movement that can stand up to tyranny, to autocrats, to the selfish and self-serving who want to break our institutions and bust our unions so that they can pay us less, make our jobs less safe, and our futures less secure. And I submit that we are that movement, the American labor movement. I've seen it in my own life, as have so many folks on this call. A union is the path to a better life. And we know a union means higher wages, higher health care, a voice on the job, and especially for black and brown workers in this country, opportunity that for way too long was withheld from us. And what excites me so much about this movement today is that we look like this country, more workers of color than we've ever had before. Women are half of our movement, and we have incredible new leaders. Like at my own union, the United Steelworkers, where we just swore in Roxanne Brown as the new president. A black woman from Jamaica and New York is now leading the Steelworkers Union. That is a story you could not dream of a few decades ago, and that is now a reality. And we're seeing more and more people of color, women, young workers taking over the reins and taking over the leadership of their union. Look, we are the movement that is connecting everybody. And there's nothing that scares Donald Trump and his billionaire friends more than workers coming together. No matter what party you belong to, and saying we don't accept what's happening in this country, and we have the power to change that. So I can't think of a May Day in recent history that has been as important as this one. We need the biggest May Day ever, not just to reflect on everything our four brothers and four sisters won and secured for us today, but to show our own power, that they might all have the money, that they might have all the money in the world, but workers beat billionaires every time. And we can rally this country around our vision for the future. Our vision, where workers have money in their pockets, a voice on the job, a good retirement, and everybody in this country knows what we mean when we say it's better in the union. That's the vision that our labor movement, the AFL-CIO, and all of our affiliate unions is fighting for. And that's why we're going to be out there on May Day and every day standing strong. 15 million workers across our 65 unions. And I can't wait to see you all out there in solidarity. Because with solidarity, as long as we stand together, brothers and sisters, we will win. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Brother Redmond. And thank you again for being here. For everybody just joining, please, if you can, make a contribution to peoplesworld.org/donate. We're in the last swing of our fund drive. And next, I want to call on a great friend of People's World, a longtime trade unionist out of New York City, Brother Ed Ott. Take it away, Ed.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm actually very happy to be here. I really want to associate myself with the spirit of Brother Redmond's remarks. This is a May Day that is ripe with opportunity and as probably as important a May Day as we've had, at least here in New York, that we've had in a long time. There's a real opportunity here. I'm a retiree now from PSC, Professional Staff Congress at CUNY. And I was on their union meeting last night, and they were fusing their May Day mobilization with their collective bargaining rights, with the demands that the CUNY workers have in their collective bargaining in the budget fight in the city of New York. They really are beginning to see that people get it. Trump has attacked the working people across the board. And it's no longer enough to just settle down into your own little niche and fight for your next demand. We need to get together with other workers, other worker class organizations, and add a dimension to the resistance to the Trump era. May Day is a real opportunity to allow us to bring forth the working class as a major leadership component in what has been a very broad but unfocused opposition to the Trump fascists. The other thing that I think is really important right now, and you're seeing it across the city here, is the war in Iran has brought back onto the table the aggressive nature of U.S. foreign policy. And everybody's kind of gets it. If they somehow manage to settle the Iran conflict in the next few weeks, it changes nothing. We already know that the next target is Cuba. We saw what they did in Venezuela. And Cuba, which is a country that represents a threat to no one, is going to be brutally attacked as they try to oust the government of Cuba. That we have been going after Cuba since the 60s. It has been isolated. It has been boycotted. It has been under siege by the United States. It is part of a war strategy now. So we need to be aware of that. And I think you're going to see people in New York marching under the banner of their demands against local government, the needs of workers. The other issue that is emerging strongly in New York is the demand for affordable housing and how that gets done, who pays for it, where it's going to be, who's allowed to get it, and the actual defining affordable in a way that working class people can actually afford to live in the city. And that is a battle that is going to be brought forward in May Day. One thing I do want to say too, we're learning. It's been a learning process. We saw in Minnesota what a mobilized populace can do to resist the attacks on immigrant workers. For a long time, in my tenure at the Central Labor Council, I talked about the importance of the unions of the city developing respectful and productive relationships with organizations of immigrants. The folks in Minnesota put that into action and showed what it is. We are now in a May Day where all of the working class organizations of the city can come together and step forward as a unified, organized movement. This is not something that's going to be done easily, but this May Day, more than many others, and the Central Labor Council has been coordinating the May Day in New York City now for the last number of years. They're playing a leading role in this and coordinating it. but there's also the organizations of housing activists, the organizations of immigrants, the women's organizations of the city, and the LGBTQ organizations of the city, including their caucuses in the labor union, that are all coming together and understanding. We cannot fight this as separate entities around single issues. We need to join in a broad class formation and add to the broad resistance to the Trump fascists. And with that, I'll yield my time.
Thank you so much, Brother Ott. Next, we'll hear from another major city, Chicago, Illinois. And Chicago is important, like Brother Redmond said, is in 1886, the Haymarket Affair. And we're going to call on Sister Sylvia Chapman from CWA District 4 to tell us about what's going on in Chicago this year and how the CWA and the Chicago Federation of Labor are planning to celebrate and also demonstrate on May Day this year. Sister Sylvia, when you're ready, take it away.
Good evening, family, friends, and activists. I'm honored to be with you today and would like first to thank People's World for all they do to support labor and our communities. I would also like to thank those of you who have joined this evening. It shows your commitment to democracy. I've been a proud member of CWA for over 40 years, and I am most proud of our union's commitment to human rights, not only in the workplace, but in our communities. This May Day, also known as International Workers' Day, we acknowledge the 140th anniversary of the Haymarket Affair in Chicago, which occurred on May 1st, 1886. On May Day, we commemorate labor and advocate for justice in our communities and this world. This May Day, we have been asked by the Chicago Teachers Union and the Chicago Federation of Labor to support an economic blackout. What this means is that those who can take off work, do so, and we will not make any purchases on this day. The relevance of this is to show the power of our labor, those that are unionized and ununionized workers. And our dollars we spend each day and its untold impact for workplaces and corporations who choose not only to look at workers as resources for their bottom lines. This economic blackout recognizes the power of all races, ethnic groups, genders, sexual orientations, religions, economic levels, and it's apolitical, which means diversity, equity, and inclusion is recognized. This is a great way to honor those that fought, bled, and died for the rights of all in this country. No ICE, no war, and protecting our voting rights is our battle cry in 2026 because we have our own citizens being terrorized and killed by those who are supposed to protect this country. Undocumented people denied due process of law because of an administration that chooses to ignore their rights and the suppression of voting rights. All of these things are an erosion of democracy in this country. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all was defined in the U.S. Constitution. The comfort of a few should not come at the cost of many. And I would like to close with a quote that I think defines unity, which is needed at this time to protect our democracy. The author is unknown, and it reads, "When one person stands up, they are often not noticed, but when thousands stand up, they cannot be overlooked." Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Sister Sylvia. And last but certainly not least, gonna call on Sister Caitlyn Clark, who just got back from Greeley, Colorado, at a super monumental and important strike of meatpacking workers. So Caitlyn's going to tell us about the strike in Greeley and how that fits into the larger May Day planning and organizing going on. So Sister Caitlyn, take it away.
Hi everyone, thanks for being here tonight. I'm really excited to be talking about the first major meatpacking strike in 40 years, which just concluded last week in Greeley, Colorado. So for 3 weeks, UFCW Local 7 launched an unfair labor practice strike at JBS after a member of the rank and file bargaining committee had been wrongfully terminated. Workers were facing illegal discipline and surveillance for their participation in union activity throughout their contract campaign. And these workers were taking on one of the largest meatpacking companies in the entire world. JBS is a multinational corporation based in Brazil. They're the #1 producer of beef in the United States. They're the #2 producer of pork in the United States and the #2 producer of poultry in the United States. So much of the food that we consume in the US comes from JBS, is owned by just this one company. In fact, JBS is one of 4 major meat packers that own 85% of all of the beef production in this country. So the workers at the JBS Greeley plant literally feed America. This is the flagship plant of JBS in the US. It's where their corporate headquarters is based. It's one of the largest JBS plants in the country. And they're doing extremely essential work that keeps people across the nation fed. And yet these are some of the most dangerous jobs you can imagine. Workers that we met on the picket line showed, chemical burns on their hands, cuts on their hands. They had even prolapsed organs or herniated discs from lifting too much weight or doing repeated motions too frequently, working too fast as the speed of the production line goes up and up by every year, as the meatpacking companies try to squeeze more labor out of less workers for less money and less hours. So these are extremely essential jobs, but they're also extremely dangerous jobs. Some of one of the biggest issues that workers won in their contract after the end of the strike was an agreement that JBS would be paying for the personal protective equipment that previously workers were having the cost of be garnished directly from their wages out of their paycheck without their consent. Personal protective equipment like mesh arm guards or mesh vests, gloves, things that would protect people from getting cut with knives, getting stabbed with meat hooks that they used for their jobs. These extremely essential pieces of equipment would be provided to them when they're first hired. But if the equipment was ever damaged, lost, or stolen, workers would have to replace it out of their own pockets. And this could cost them up to $1,100 for workers that are still living paycheck to paycheck. And so one of the big successes of this contract that workers were most excited about was that JBS agreed to retroactively reimburse any expenditure on the PPE in the last 52 weeks before contract ratification, and to develop a better system for replacing this equipment, that they would not charge any worker anything for personal protective equipment until that system was developed. And hopefully that system will create a better accountability mechanism for the employer to pay for personal protective equipment, not for that cost to fall on the workers. And again, to go back to how absurd it is that workers were being required to pay for their own personal protective equipment, we can compare this to the multi-billionaire family that owns the company JBS, the Batista family. Who has been embroiled in years of corruption scandals. The 2 brothers that have the largest share of the company actually went to jail in 2017 for insider trading. They were involved in one of the biggest political scandals in recent Brazilian history called Operation Car Wash, where they're bribing thousands of politicians over decades for political favors. And earlier this year, they actually went public on the New York Stock Exchange after many years of struggling with regulators and politicians in the United States to be allowed to trade their stock on the New York Stock Exchange, because they were literally considered to be too corrupt, and their business practices to be too unsavory, their labor practices to be too dangerous, their deforestation of the Amazon was too problematic for them to be traded on the New York Stock Exchange. And it wasn't until they made a $5 million donation to Donald Trump's inauguration fund the largest single donation to the inauguration fund that they were suddenly waved through by regulators and approved for their IPO. So now they're exposed to billions and billions more of investment money that's going into this company, and yet they're paying $100 million in legal fees and court settlements for things like illegal price fixing to raise meat prices for customers, illegal collusion with other meatpacking companies to repress worker wages, child labor law violations at the JBS Greeley plant, and allegations of human trafficking at the JBS plant. To talk more, though, about the strike and some of the really profound things that this strike that we can learn from this strike. So it's 3,800 workers speaking 57 different languages, coming from more than 50 countries and nationalities all around the world. Haitian and Somali workers in particular, who have been targets from the Trump administration's aggressive kind of attacks on immigrant workers. Haitian workers especially had filed a class action lawsuit against JBS in alleging that JBS had participated in racial discrimination against the Haitian workers and putting them on a particular shift, increasing the speed of the line, which makes the work much more difficult and much more dangerous. And yet, immigrant workers are standing up in the face of the current administration's attacks on immigrants. On the day of the strike authorization vote, there were multiple ICE agents stationed outside of the plant. And that day, workers voted to authorize a strike by 99% anyways. This is really a shining example of immigrant workers from all over the world coming together and uniting around a common cause, despite the barriers they might face of language or culture. These are barriers that the meatpackers have spent decades cultivating to prevent workers from organizing with one another and to further exploit them. But what we saw on the picket line in Greeley was workers singing together, sharing music, dancing, sharing food with each other, workers exhibiting so much bravery in the face of both their employer and the current state of immigration policy. And it really shows the importance of the labor movement and the shared fight to stand up for the dignity and respect of all workers, regardless of where they come from. That's what brings people together across these barriers. And I think that finally brings us to talk more about May Day, is we're building labor solidarity to stand up for all workers, regardless of their origin. And I spoke to members out on the picket line about what was most important to them about the strike. And what was really profound to me was hearing workers talk about how their working conditions maybe were not the worst in the plant, but the strike to them was about standing up for their coworkers who they knew were facing worse working conditions than them, who they knew were getting harassed, who they knew were being prevented from going to the bathroom or taking bathroom breaks. And these are often the more vulnerable workers with less English proficiency, newer immigrants to the US. And they spoke about, fighting for somebody who you may not even be able to communicate with them in the same language, but you will still fight for them nonetheless. And you recognize that your success in your fight against, the corporate greed of these massive employers is tied up in the solidarity that we can build with one another. We need to be taking on these massive employers, whether that's JBS, Kroger, Albertsons, even Walmart and Whole Foods or Amazon. Every year, these companies get bigger and bigger, and we need to be building a coordinated strike threat across the union and across the labor movement to take on these huge employers because they get bigger and bigger. And our power as workers should be getting bigger and bigger to match them. It's the only way that we'll be able to take on this level of corporate greed, this level of inequality that's facing workers today. And so with Essential Workers for Democracy, we're organizing from the bottom up to fight the boss and build a more democratic, member-driven UFCW at the level of the shop floor, the local union, and the international. So thank you all for having me, and I will pass it back to Kim.
Thank you so much, Sister Caitlyn. And for those who want to read more about the JBS strike, please check out Caitlyn's article. I think Caitlyn, that was in Jacobin. I wrote one in People's World. And, please, keep the meatpacking workers in your mind when you march for May Day, but also keep all workers and our fellow workers and unions in mind when we march and demonstrate for workers' rights this May Day. Next, we're going to go to a question and answer period. So I'm going to call on all the panelists to turn your cameras on, and we will do a Q&A. Some questions are coming in now from the audience. And the first question is actually to Brother Fred Redmond. One of our listeners says, does organized labor, and in particular the AFL-CIO, see working people taking a leadership role in our economy as vital to the well-being of the people in the United States? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. Look, first of all, thank you for the question. And, the labor movement believes very strongly that you cannot have a society that truly represents the working people of this country without having economic justice. As Dr. King said, you can't have social justice without economic justice. So we feel very strongly that um, things that, the labor movement for years have built the social justice framework in this country, including the black middle class, uh, rights for women and the ability for women to earn decent living. So the labor movement uh, is part of this movement in every aspect, okay? But we feel very, very strongly that as we talk about the destruction and eliminating tyrannism in this country and eliminating, everything that this administration stands for, we have to make sure that we get our economic footing back. Okay, we have to pass things like the PRO Act and make it easier for workers to achieve that economic justice. And that's what we're committed to.
Thank you. The next question is for Brother Ed, and that's on military spending. So they were listening intently to your speech. They ask, the administration in the White House seems determined to spend more and more money on the military budget and on provoking wars abroad. How does this impact workers and people back here at home?
Well, to quote the President of the United States, in his view, we can't afford things like child care, Medicare, Medicaid, because we got a war to fight. It's a question of their priorities. The truth of the matter is there's loads of money in this country. The war is going to become an excuse. It's the old shock doctrine applied. The war becomes an excuse to not fund things that people really need and people really want. They're going to ask already the $200 billion more from the Congress as a way of paying for some of the weapons that they've already shot and killed thousands of people with. And this is something we always have to remember. It's not a budget question. It's a question of what their priorities are, and it's all part of a class justice that exists. There is money for Medicare, there is money for Medicaid, and there is certainly money for childcare. The war is going to be an excuse to defund the things that people really need. Don't accept the numbers. They make the numbers up as they go along.
Thanks, brother. The next question is directed to Sister Faye. This attendee asks, is a general strike a realistic goal? What does no work, no school, no shopping mean for working people, is their question.
Yes,
Take it away, Faye.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I've been talking about striking and in general a general strike. We've ran 5 strikes in the last 2.5 years at UFCW 3000, and striking or a general strike takes practice. It takes getting ready to strike over and over and over again. So if we really wanted to build for a general strike in 2028, we have to do all of the little steps between now and then to get ready, including May Day, getting into the streets, organizing unions, practicing striking, taking your unit out on strike, like what happened with the meatpacking workers that Caitlyn was talking about. And it's little things. You can strike for a minute, you can strike for a day, you can strike for a week. Practicing striking, learning how to do that, learning how to build that solidarity. One of the things I said, the simplest thing to get ready for a general strike is actually to get everybody to take their breaks together. It's that building that collective muscle. The breaks are protected by the law, they're in union contracts. People do not take their breaks. If we all just took our breaks together and practiced doing that, we would be far better off and far more ready for a general strike of any kind. I talked about the general strike pledge card. It talks about, and we have a whole team of attorneys across the country working right now to help unions who have no strike clauses mitigate risk and have workers take action regardless of those no strike clauses, including the fact that when the government does something like deploy ICE agents within a few miles of your workplace and it is causing danger, you have safety rights. You have rights as workers that are outside your union contract that are protected in different ways. And I'm happy to share some of the legal memos we've been working on. So, can we get ready for a general strike? Hell yeah, we've done it before. During the robber baron era, things were so bad, and it's much worse right now. There's more concentration of wealth right now. So yes, we can get ready, but we can do that by taking our breaks, 1-minute strikes, 1-day strikes, practicing solidarity with each other, and coming out on May Day. That's how we will get ready for bigger and bigger actions to take back our democracy and stop the fascist overtaking of our country right now.
Thanks, sister. The next question comes in from Connecticut, and I'm going to give this one to Sister Sylvia. What workers' demands are you or your union prioritizing this May Day?
Well, as always, we're concerned about their wages, well-being, not only on the job, but in their communities. As we said, looking at the things that have been occurring in this nation, one being voting rights being stripped away or trying to be stripped away. We're concerned about those items that do affect, if we don't have the right people in office to pass legislation to support labor or workers.
Thank you, Sister Sylvia. Got a question in from Jay Ozier. Jay's a member of the CVTU in St. Louis. And his question is for Mr. Fred Redmond. How will May Day help us in the November 2026 elections?
Well, May Day, well, first of all, it will galvanize us and it will show what we could do. As Faye said, is when we stick together as a movement and we all move in the same direction, it will be a self-confidence booster to us, okay, to show that we as the working class is willing to fight for our liberation, for our justice, and basically for our basic freedoms. So, this sort of action is warranted at this time. We have talked about over the years the third Reconstruction. And I would submit that we're on the verge of the third Reconstruction in this country. We cannot exist as workers. We cannot exist, okay, as ordinary people that get up every day, go to work, pay our taxes, raise our children, and try to be good citizens. We cannot exist with this vicious attack that's coming from this government towards workers, okay? And then to and then to live in a society that's perpetuating war and horror around the world. So we have to speak out, like the old saying go, if not us, who? We want to participate in the struggle, but we also feel as though organized labor is people who can lead this struggle for self-determination and this struggle for fairness, to return our society to its historical greatness, okay, and to hold this country accountable for what they write on paper, okay, in terms of the rights and freedoms of working people. So nobody, in my opinion, can really lead this sort of movement except the labor movement. So May Day is a step for us to show what we can do. It will mobilize us going into 2028, and it will really, I think, inspire young people. Okay. I think that younger people will gravitate toward a resistance movement, and there's no better time to show the power of workers than on Workers' Memorial Day.
Thank you so much. Caitlyn, we got a question for you from Atlanta, Georgia. They write, I'm a low-wage service worker in Georgia. What questions and conversations would you recommend with approaching coworkers to convince them to also take part in May Day?
Well, I think, like with all organizing, we want to start by getting to the heart of what issues are affecting your coworkers. What things are they dealing with on the day to day that would, pull them out to come to a May Day event? I know, especially organizing with low-wage service workers, workers in the grocery retail industry in particular, through Essential Workers for Democracy. It's really hard to get your coworkers to spend the rare amount of free time that they have to spend money to put gas in their car and go out to an event. Oftentimes low-wage service workers have multiple jobs that they have to work. And so there are a lot of obstacles that workers might face in participating in actions like this. But the way that we can encourage our coworkers to show up for things that we believe are important is to have meaningful organizing conversations with them about what it is for them that is important. What is it about their lives? What would it mean for them to be able to have a living wage, to not have to worry about their healthcare costs? And what do they think it's going to take for us to win those things? And maybe you can also, offer them a ride if they don't have the gas money to come to the event, or organize a carpool with your coworkers. But I think really what we want to do is have listen to people. You have two ears and one mouth, so we want to listen more than we speak, and understand from our coworkers what it is that they're dealing with on the day to day, and where we can find common ground with them, and how we can bring them into a broader movement to fight for better working conditions and better lives for all working people across the country.
Thank you. We have time for a few more. The next one is back to Sister Sylvia Chapman, and this question comes from California. What does all this mean for Black workers, and do Black workers have a stake in this battle and in May Day?
Absolutely. The importance of Black workers being in unions have helped us to with equity as far as in our jobs, and equity in the communities too, because we were those that were overlooked because of our color and things, and continue to be. But for unions, we would not be middle class. I grew up in a family that supported unions, worked in unions, and because of that, I was able to get a good education and get a union job myself, which has been able to support, my family too. So I think it helped build a middle class for Black people, starting with the Pullman Porters, which originated in Chicago. Yeah, it does a lot for Black people.
Thank you, sister. Brother Fred Redmond, you seem to be very popular with the questions. But this will be the last one for you, and we'll get to one to two more. But this question is on the minds of a lot of workers. How is organized labor responding to the developments of AI and mass layoffs? Can AI be implemented to actually bring benefits for working people rather than just costing us our jobs?
Yeah, last or 2 weeks ago, we held a AI summit in Washington, D.C. That was well attended. We heard from a lot of people who are professionals in that field. And, one of the things that, we came away from that with is we do not have to be scared of AI. And the labor movement is on record of not being against AI. What we are against is the misuse of AI, of artificial intelligence, really, really taking, companies using artificial intelligence to the decimate of workers and using AI to replace people on the jobs. But if used correctly, I mean, artificial intelligence can be a powerful tool that can help workers, okay, can improve our jobs. But we have to question some of these companies who are really, really investing heavily in AI. We have to question how municipalities and governments, local governments, are using AI to perpetrate some of the things that people have been victim with over the years, such as redlining, just as gerrymandering, and things that have had a negative effect on people is being now perpetrated through the advantage of AI. We don't want AI to be infringing on our healthcare freedoms and our healthcare rights. We don't want AI to be taking away our jobs, and we don't want AIs to just control every aspect of our life and literally spy on us and share information with our employers. So AI can be dangerous for workers, but it can also be good for workers. So what we're doing at the AFL-CIO, we're working with our affiliate unions to help generate contract language to protect workers against the infringement upon artificial intelligence into their personal lives. And we're also, through our state feds and our central labor councils, we're also engaged in discussions on the municipal level to make sure that AI is used for the good of people, of workers in this country, and not used against them. So we're at the forefront of this. We have invested a lot to work with our affiliate unions to make sure that artificial intelligence do not be the how should I say it, should not be the mechanism that the billionaire class and employers and government is going to use toward the destruction of workers in this country. So, artificial intelligence is something that we as workers have to pay attention to. And we're doing that through the AFL-CIO.
Thank you so much. Last question is for Sister Faye, and they ask, when people get rid of the current wannabe dictator, which I assume is Mr. Trump, what comes next? Should we go back to the way things were, the old status quo, or should we move forward instead? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we can't go back to the way it was before because it
Right.
wasn't working for working people, and our system isn't working right now, and a lot of it's around our political parties, both sides, too much money in politics, billionaires control the Democrats and the Republicans. The thing that we are going to have to do is take all that money we usually spend on politics and organize workers. The labor movement has shrunk down to lower than 9%, even though we had a good year last year. If workers are going to have a say and build a better future, we have to be able to influence and control both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans and any other party. They need to do our bidding, the workers' bidding. They need to do what we ask them to do, regardless of party. And the only way to do that is to rebuild our power to 30%, 35%, 40% of workers in a union. The workers have to be in unions so that we can have orchestrated, built power that lasts for a long time. If I love all the protest people go to, but if they don't go home and organize a union, that vaporizes, that power vaporizes. We need permanent worker infrastructure. And the way you have permanent worker infrastructure is through a union. And then we can build towards the multiracial democracy that we deserve and we are close to. The third Reconstruction that Fred was talking about is possible. It is before us. We could grab it. But the way we have to grab it is by organizing workers into permanent worker infrastructure through their unions. So May Day March is great. I love it. Go organize a union. If you work, you can organize a union. If your sister works, they can organize a union. It doesn't matter. Every worker can organize a union. And that is the only way we're going to build something better. That is the only way forward. That's the only path forward. And I hope that's what happens, because I do think a new future is possible.
Thank you so much. Organize the unorganized, a good last word. And thank you to our panelists and guests for being here tonight. It's been wonderful, and I feel honored to share this virtual stage with all of you. And we hope everybody viewing at home also enjoyed this town hall discussion. If you found it to be valuable, we're going to ask one more time that you please consider making a donation to People's World or becoming a monthly sustainer. Contributions from our supporters are what makes events like this possible. Again, you can go to peoplesworld.org/donate. And we see a lot of union workers in the chat. Perhaps your union would like to take out an ad in the People's World May Day ad book, the greetings book that we do every year. There's still time to get in your message, which will reach many thousands of working people on May 1st. Just check out the People's World homepage and scroll down to the Fund Drive section. There's a link there about the greetings book that has all the details. The deadline is Monday, though, so be quick. And last but not least, the reporters, the editors, and all volunteer correspondents of People's World, thank you in advance for your support. Thank you for being here tonight. And let's go all out for May Day. Take to the streets for workers' power. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night.